Hi everyone. Welcome to the GCS Connect Leaders Series. We've got Robert Sugrue, who's a cyber security business consultant today, really talking about cybersecurity over the last 30 years that he's worked with his industry and the growth all the way from the original kind of PCs all the way through to large language models and how things have changed so much, but also how they haven't changed that much at all. So really enjoyed the conversation. Here's Robert. Hi there, Robert. How are you?
Hi, David. Very well, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, really well, really well. Yes. So yeah, really looking forward to this chat. We've got Robert Sugrue, who is a cybersecurity director of 25 years in the business. And we're really interested to speak to Robert because he's consulting and advising multiple businesses at the moment around cybersecurity, around what it means now, what it means in the next 18 months, and how to set up systems in a way that's going to help people be efficient, productive, and secure in the coming exciting, interesting, dangerous few years that are coming up. So yeah, we obviously, as you know, GCS Cyber is a big part of our business as well, and Robert's someone we've been speaking to and working with over the last few years. So it's great to have you on the podcast, Robert. Nice to see you.
Thanks, David. Really looking forward to it.
Fantastic, good stuff. So I always start off with just finding out or letting our listeners find out a little bit more about you, your background, where you come from, and obviously in this one, I mean, we were just talking there about you were doing security before it was cyber security. So how did you get into this? What particularly interested you about being a leader in this particular area?
Well, believe it or not, I started my career as a money market trader back
Right.
in the days of sort of the open outcry markets, the life exchange, and all that sort of thing. Working in the financial sector, working for a bank at a point of time where a lot of the data that the news providers like Reuters and Telerate at the time were producing was becoming more available to be extracted into spreadsheets, into programs, so that we could manipulate the data, quickly see the advantages in the markets, all the sort of things that these days that traders take for granted. But it was all very, very new and very cutting edge back then. But I had a flair then for technology, and I was able to move my skill set into information technology at that point in time, where I was able to apply those skills to a much broader part of the bank, not just sort of the money market trading, but also corporate finance and commodity trading.
Was that self-taught, Robert? Were you kind of like
Abs-
interested, or did someone highlight your, wow, you could move into this area?
Absolutely. I mean, I was dragged up on an Acorn Electron from a young
Wonderful.
age. I
Yeah,
did a lot of stuff on BBC
yeah,
computers, Apple Macs later on in my sort of
sure.
my school years. But I was given a program for what's basically called position keeping, where you keep track of what the traders are doing, and it
Mm.
was written on Lotus 123.
Ah,
So I very quickly taught myself how that all worked, how formulas work, and that was my introduction to spreadsheets. And I think if I hadn't have gone into technology and cybersecurity, I probably would have fallen into accounts, because my love of spreadsheets is absolutely awful.
we've done two, we've done two podcasts. There's one that's just recently come out with the guy called David, and he also started very much in Excel, Lotus 123 as a kind of a, is it an IBM version of Excel spreadsheets? Back in the
Absolutely.
day. I mean, we've mentioned BBC, Acorn, and Lotus 123 in the first 5 minutes of it. So we are like archaeologists of technology now. We've got the ZX Spectrum next.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I can even make it worse, because as I fell into technology, I very quickly discovered the banking systems which were running on old AS400s,
Oh,
um,
AS100, yeah.
on a
This is like a bingo card of old technology here, do you know?
yeah, on a token ring network.
Oh, and a LAN network, that sort of stuff. Oh, fantastic. This is great.
Yeah, yeah.
The
So
people born after the year 1995 will probably be thinking, what the hell are these guys talking about? But this is the basis. This is the frontier land of technology, isn't it?
absolutely, absolutely. And I think if you get that good base, you understand so much more, and how modern technology is even
Mm.
working and how it's put together. And it's fascinating how you can still talk about these things, and some of the processes and protocols are still
Mm.
relevant today.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it also is it is a little bit like fashion as well. Like you think of like a data center or a cloud, and obviously it's slightly different, but it's not that much different to like a mainframe. What matter like everything's centralized, right? And then you move to the
Absolutely.
PCs where all the PCs were very, very strong and holding all the data, and now it's gone back into the data centers. You know,
Yeah.
these elements have have really kind of helped, they've driven technology on, but people have these ideas and then they're like, actually no, the old idea might have been better in the first place, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely. I mean, I still remember going to and learning about
Mm.
clustering machines, and the dreaded fact that these clusters might become so powerful that they could break encryption. Guess what
Yeah,
happened?
yeah, exactly. I mean, do you think so? I mean, as a cybersecurity, like you've moved through this, and we'll talk more about your career, but do you think as you've come through, and obviously the internet is a game changer when it comes to security itself, right? Because it's easier to hack from external or whatever. But do you think that where we're at now with regards to our technology and with regards to the way we use technology and the importance of technology, that more than ever, like we've become less secure in our use of technology just due to the more importance of it?
Absolutely. I mean, there's two ways of looking at that, because I think
Mm,
certainly we have become so much more secure than we were
mm,
in the late 90s. We'd put a firewall on the end of something and think that was it. There's no real
yeah.
inspection of what was going across it. But
Mm,
then at the same time, the use of technology is now so diverse. So just the other day, we had an internet outage at home, and it meant that we lost our heating system, our lights, door access. Fortunately, things like alarms still have that backup, but there's so many elements that we just take for granted, but they're all surfaces, they're all areas. I mean,
mm,
we often look at Internet of Things and OT, and sort of, yeah, these are all things that we have to consider now, because everything we do is related to a technical device of some type. And if
mm,
that's not protected, it is, it's that little weakness that we might have somewhere, particularly for businesses that might be using a bring your own device policy or something along those lines. If someone's using multiple tablets, phones, laptops, they might have a desktop computer that the kids use as well. There are so many different attack surfaces out there now that, in many ways, although the level of security technology that we're using has improved,
mm.
our overall security is diminishing because we've got so many access points that are out
Yeah.
there and available for attackers to use.
And I guess because more fine, I mean, in the end, crime is usually about money, right? Data equals money, but
That's it.
there's financial transactions, bank accounts, all that sort of stuff, and everything's held more electronically. The data is held more electronically, not on paper. Then there's more to get, isn't there? So there's more people trying to get it, and that
Absolutely.
that exponentially is increasing the need for more security and more sophisticated security.
Absolutely, and without a doubt, data is king. Data is what
Mm,
everybody wants. Data is what you can hold someone to ransom over.
mm.
Gone are the days of
More than like money, like more than rinse your bank account. It's better to get your data and then ransom you than get your money and then
I,
they've got the money.
I think it's
You
the
know,
easy option. Of course, you could
yeah,
you could get the data, you could get the information, and then try a fraudulent approach to sort of setting up an account, gaining access to banking systems. But this is one of the areas where technology has improved so much. The
mm,
identification of fraudulent activity is so
yeah,
much more improved. So, why would you try and go to all those lengths with the possibility of being caught? Where actually, if you just use the dark web and ransom someone, particularly a business, over the
mm,
sort of release of that critical data. And
yeah,
we all know the fines and things that people can get into trouble for simple breaches of
yeah,
things like GDPR. We've got DORA out there now as well that's come on the scene. It's going to have similar fines if people don't do what they are supposed to be doing. It's a real game changer for the attackers to just turn around and say, well, unless you give us this money, we're gonna tell someone, we can tell somebody about this, and you'll be in so much more trouble when we release this data because you've not done things that you should have been doing to secure it.
And one of the reasons why we can talk to you about this is obviously to go back to your kind of career, as we were talking about, is obviously your growth with convergent networks and CNS and moving to different areas. So you've really been at the forefront, haven't you, of kind of network security, infrastructure security, both in a kind of internal and a customer facing way. So can you can you kind of take us through that in relation to you and the changes that you've seen over the last 10 to 15 years in terms of your business and the business that your customers have been asking your organization to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, soon after I moved into the world of technology, we spoke about token ring. We were facing the millennial bug. So
Oh yeah, God.
we, we
That's
made
definitely on the bingo card for
bingo card.
Y2K. Yeah, we got that.
But we needed to do something to make sure we got through that. So at that time, it was the logical move to NT4. And with NT4, we also looked at our
I'm
first.
ticking that off as well.
Yeah, NT4, SP4,
That's right.
and Ethernet
Can we say
network.
Solaris now, Robert, please? Solaris. Done
Well,
Solaris. That was always my favorite.
I'll go RS6000.
Oh, wonderful. This is beautiful.
Because that was one of the systems that we used to
Yeah.
introduce checkpoint firewalling. It was one of those systems that we could run checkpoint software over the top of. So as we built out these NT4 networks, Exchange 5 was really bringing email alive for businesses. The internet was still in its infancy at that point, but becoming quite an important tool that businesses needed to start using. Of course, as soon as you want that connection, you then have to start looking at firewalling. So we originally, I still remember the bank had an ISDN dial-up that would dial up every 15 minutes, pull the emails down, and then distribute them via Exchange, which seems unbelievable these days when we expect that reply straight away.
Yeah, totally.
That was on Sonic Wall firewalls. We decided that wasn't right. It didn't take long for us to realize you need that permanent connection. We went with a 2 meg circuit, lightning speeds at those times. And we moved checkpoint firewalls. And we first deployed that, as I said, on an RS6000, but later on to sort of the old Nokia IP boxes, the 330s, the 350s. So back then, sort of very much my focus was around that infrastructure technology, the introduction of Ethernet, gig backplanes, which we soon moved on to sort of into the Cisco world, Cisco Acers as well, NetScreen Junipers as they were at the time. And very much it was around how you made sure that those infrastructures were redundant, how you had that high availability, so sort of having a primary and a secondary or an active firewall at the front end, putting in your demilitarized zones, putting additional firewalls, then protecting your LAN. But those firewalls back then, they're not the next generation ones, or even the newer generation firewalls that we see today that do that deep inspection right away across up to layer 7. These were really just, it's a port, yes, I'm going to allow it, or I'm not going to allow it. But that was a very basic level of security that we needed back then. Now, how that's evolved is incredible because I think we've done such a great job at securing our gateways, the firewall technology, the ability to have these next generation firewalls that can do that deep packet inspection, really, really helping organizations assure the quality of data that's traversing their gateways. But of course, all that really did was change the attack point that the adversaries were going for. The firewalls always, go through the front door and you go in, you've got the keys to the kingdom. But that very much has changed, and we've seen a massive move to EDR technology, endpoint technology, to secure our networks with the likes of, we started off with, BlackBerry now owned, but Silence was one of the first EDR technologies that I came across and was using, and it was just an incredible game changer compared to a traditional antivirus because it stopped those things happening. It saw behavior that it was not right, and was able to isolate and lock that down. Of course, now the likes of Microsoft have moved into that space with Defender for Endpoint, and if you start looking around, all of the big names out there, CrowdStrike, all of the sort of traditional antivirus vendors have now moved into that EDR space. So it's a very saturated market now, but it's a great technology that's protecting the endpoint. So what I've seen is certainly that shift from, let's not go through the front door. It's very similar to car crime when the technology in car security evolved. You could no longer break in and hotwire a car. You had to go for the keys. So you're looking at that a different attack surface. And it's the same with technology. And we've moved that sort of primary attack surface from the front door, from the gateway to the endpoint now. And that's evolving even further where, the endpoint is now secure. It's able to detect those sort of malicious activities and immediately stop that sort of thing happening. Of course, then the attackers have moved on to us, the people. So now people are being, phishing, all of these things, social media attacks as well, where they're trying to find information about people, false sites. All of that information is being gathered so that people can start to understand who that person is, what their username might be, what organizations they're working for. So it's very much a data discovery exercise than a technical approach as it used to be. So there's been this huge evolution, and I think that's where we are now. And where's this going to go? What's going to be next is the interesting question.
No, that's right. And I think that's something everyone's asking, because the one key thing that you know about like networks, infrastructure, etc., but cyber is it's everywhere, right? Every single company, every single organization, every single individual has to think about this, because it is a all prevalent thing. I think kind of coming into your journey as a leader itself, and obviously seeing this as it comes through, what's potentially like the biggest team that you've run, Robert, or the biggest kind of cyber function that you've worked with just in your time? And I'll
I think I've been really lucky recently to be able to chair across all of our cybersecurity teams and bring those teams together and lead them with a sort of a joined up approach to cybersecurity. And I think a lot of people still keep things separate. You've still got your sort of your governance, risk and compliance, your kind of traditional consultancy. You've got your penetration testing teams who are also might be looking then at red teaming and other types of exercises. You've got your services. You've got your sort of threat intelligence services, your traditional SOC services, MDR, MXDR services that people are offering, and equally internal security. So I was able to bring the leaders of all of those areas in my last business, which was an MSP, together and get everybody thinking together and thinking about solutions in the same room. And I say that's probably one of the biggest sort of impacting teams that I've had the privilege and incredible people that I've worked with. To understand what they're all thinking, understand different approaches, understand different angles, and you're not just bringing those directors and leaders of those various parts of business in together, but equally people like solutions architects, incredibly great technical minds, and getting them all around that table and bringing them together to sort of look at, well, what can we do together? How can we make
how can we improve it?
Exactly.
And the reason I ask is I always feel like it's an expansion, isn't it? Obviously it's become more important, and one of the things we talk about in this podcast is leadership. But if you think about, I would suggest that in the start there would be a couple of security people, within an IT team, and they would do that. And over the time, it's growing to where like a CISO really should be on the board as the representative of information security. And quite a few organizations in the industry obviously predicate that now, that the CISO has to be on the board. So it's an expansion, isn't it, of a role, probably for yourself as well. So what are the key one of the main kind of challenges that you have as a leader, or have had as a leader, when you're starting to run these big teams, when you're starting to integrate, when what you're doing is really important, but obviously that means you're rubbing up against the CFO, the head of engineering, that sort of thing. How have you combated those challenges as well?
Absolutely, and that is with no question of a doubt the biggest challenge that anyone faces with cybersecurity, regardless of their risk appetite and their budget. How do you bring as much cybersecurity into a business as possible while still being constrained by those sort of financial issues that we all have, because we haven't got bottomless amounts of money or endless amounts of money. We need to pay for these things. So one of the biggest challenges is always finding that right balance, always finding how much you can put into a service for a customer and not make it to the point where it's not affordable, or it's certainly going to raise a question mark the next time the CFO does a financial review. So a lot of what we do is about balance, and it's not just about providing the technology, it's always people, process and technology. So what are all those key elements that I'm getting? And equally looking at it from a maturity point of view, how far are you along on that maturity journey? And understanding from the business what's their risk appetite, what are the things they're worried about, because there are businesses out there that unfortunately we're all targets, but are less likely to be a target than another business, purely maybe because of the market they're in. So striking the right balance of what you're providing into an organization, and equally striking the balance if you're putting those services together around where that price point is, so that the customer's getting value or your business is getting value from your investment, is very important. And I think a lot of that as well is helped by explaining what you're doing, talking to the CFO, the CEO, the COO, why we're doing this, and making sure they understand the importance, and equally making sure they understand if you don't do this, what could be the consequence. We often say it's not a case of if, it's a case of when. And I love the analogy of a house with a burglar alarm, a strong lock on the door, window locks, etc. If you're a burglar, you're going to look at all those things, security lights, and think, hang on, I'm not going to bother with that one. But just down the road, there's a house that hasn't got those things, so that becomes the target. So it's about striking the balance that gives you the best security at the price point you need.
Yeah, and I think there is a price point, isn't there? And there's obviously efficiency points. There's also, the personal kind of aspects. If you could have everything, and you mentioned there before, is the reliance, isn't it? They talk a lot, and I've done all my skills cast cyber training that's provided me by Engage, so I know that it's generally the human being that is the weak link, right?
Absolutely, and everybody's
and
trying
the
to
most
trick us.
expensive human beings are generally known, like the managers are generally known to actually be the worst.
Absolutely. If I had a pound for every time that I've gone into a business and the only person not using multi-factor authentication is the CEO, I'd be a very, very rich man.
It's interesting, isn't it? It is kind of I guess you have to strike that balance as the leader, the person that people rely on, versus the kind of like respect, the structural hierarchy, well, if you're going to do it, like you're the guy in charge. So if you crash the whole system, that's kind of on you. So
that's it.
What sort of kind of methodology do you use to kind of, I guess, improve a company's cyber and improve a company's care of it?
Yeah, and I think it's the approach always has to be is understanding what's relevant for that company, what is it they need, and what's their appetite as well around complexity. And if you can find solutions that are going to fit well with how that company operates, that's absolutely critical. You don't want to be putting technology or process in place that is going to be a burden for that organization. If they're a very dynamic organization, off flying around all over the place, very, very fluid in what they're doing, you don't want heavy security technologies, but you want technologies that are going to protect them. So it's just choosing. And sometimes you have to choose a more expensive technology, but its ease of use is much greater. Things like passwordless technologies, using
Face ID,
all of this sort of thing is going to be much easier for a customer that doesn't want those constraints. They don't want to use their mobile phone every time they log on and put in an extra password or all that sort of thing, or challenge response. But it isn't as that's a cheaper solution, but they both provide the quality of security. So it's working with organizations, understanding what they have in place, making sure they have the basics, the fundamentals, and then looking at where we start to layer on those additional technologies that make it harder to breach that company, where they should go with those. And those technologies are absolutely important fit with the ethos of that organization.
I think it's really we talk to a lot of people that kind of work in that consultancy organization, and it's how they pitch it, how they think about it, how they build these solutions, in order to factor in what the company wants to do, what the company's appetite is, and maybe even what the kind of company's budget is. Absolutely. So when you're sitting now with CEOs, CFOs, what are the things that you're telling people to be aware of in the next 18 months? Where can you see cyber kind of moving? I mean, you mentioned this GORA. This is a new word for me, so it's not on my bingo card, Robert. So do you want to just quickly tell the listeners about what GORA is?
DORA.
Sorry. Okay, like the Explorer.
It's the new Operational Regulations Act, and it's there to protect organisations. It's aimed primarily at financial organizations, larger organizations, but it's making sure that there's a framework of security in there, looking at things like governance within the organization, risk management, incident management, incident classification, that sort of thing, information sharing, how we're sharing our data, how our data is encrypted, all of that sort of thing, making sure we're managing our third-party risk, which is a massive area that people need to look at, that supply chain, and also that businesses are resilient. And I think, there's been a lot has gone on in the last few years with the emergence of cloud technologies, where people feel that the cloud is always there for them. It's, it's not a problem. It's just easily available. They haven't got to worry about, certainly redundant hard drives, all these things. But going back to the basics of thinking, well, actually, what is the resilience of my cloud deployment? Have I got it across 2 regions or different sites? Am I backing up that data? So many people forget to back up data these days. It's unbelievable. We still need good backups of our data, and then testing those things, making sure we can restore our data, making sure we can rebuild our systems and servers. That operational resiliency piece was something that was drilled into us in the 90s, because you had to. I still remember going off-site and rebuilding servers, importing data from tapes and that sort of thing, and then getting people to come in and test.
Oh yeah, God, I remember the tapes. Yeah. When we were a business of about 10, 15 people, we had an IT guy, but he wasn't there all the time. So I had to go in, and we had a data center. We had to change. I just changed the tapes. I was like the tape changing guy, because I had like an operations hat on at one point in the history of GCS. So I had to go and change the tapes and put them in a lockbox, and I had to do them in a rotation. So I don't really understand how I've gained this responsibility, but sometimes responsibility rises, doesn't it, Robert? So
absolutely.
And so you mentioned there with regards to kind of resilience and how that works. So is this an EU regulation, or is this a kind of UK regulation, or how is this going to come to us in the UK? Obviously, we could be listening around the world, but
yeah, you've caught me out there, because I'm not 100% off the top of
okay.
my head.
Google's a very clever thing, so
so it is an EU regulation. So
right, okay,
so DORA, the Digital Operational Resiliency Act, is an EU regulation that is has been in force since the 16th of January 2023, so for a while, but it's going to become mandatory from the 17th of January 2025.
Right, okay.
Just sort of looking across what it's ranging from, it's a broad range of financial institutions are going to be mainly affected, but so many businesses are working with financial institutions, they may find that it's affecting them as well. So it's going to affect lots of businesses. As I said, it's an EU regulation, so if you're working with people in Europe, this is where this comes in. But equally, we're expecting the same sort of thing to be mandatory in the UK at some point in the future as well.
And probably the US and the such of things.
Absolutely.
And that sort of thing. So is this one of the key things that you think people should be aware of in terms of regulation, or is it movements in the actual kind of hacking, how they're using it? A lot of people mention AI, that sort of thing. What should people really be? I mean, whenever I speak to cybersecurity people, it's always what people be fearful of, right? What should be scared of? So
be scared of everything.
Yes, well, there we go. Yeah, that will be the strap line when we do this. Be scared of everything.
Be scared of everything.
The headline.
No, I think we've got DORA. We've had things like ISO 27001. If you're working in payment cards, you've got PCI DSS. You've got NIST frameworks. You've got HIPAA if you're in the health industry and sort of more American sort of side of things. There are so many frameworks, so many regulations out there, so many things that we can follow. Even sort of looking at the more simple end of things, cyber essentials, moving into cyber essentials plus. I think the most important thing about all of these, though, is they are a good, secure foundation and framework for cybersecurity. They just make you stop and think. You don't have to, unless it's mandated that you have to have one of those to carry out what your business is doing. Ultimately, they are just good frameworks that you can look at and get you thinking about, what should I be doing? What am I doing about my operational resiliency? What am I doing about my backups? How am I protecting my endpoints? What password policies and password authentication mechanisms am I using? Am I actually aware of what's going on in the market? Am I getting threat intelligence from somewhere that could be allowing me to understand more about what the threat actors might be doing for my business? So I think what we need to be aware of is it's becoming very, very easy for more and more people to launch an attack, to launch some sort of, some hostile or malicious activity against an individual or an organization. I mean, we mentioned AI, and that's what's powering that. Those large language models are making it very easy for people to learn quickly what they need to be doing and what the code is that they need to be writing. If you went straight off to Google Bard or one of the other AIs out there at the moment, ChatGPT, they're not going to answer those questions because those big AI engines are putting controls in place that are helping stop them being used for that malicious activity.
Oh, that's interesting. So if you said, could you kind of try and work out what the passwords are for Engage or GCS?
Yep.
If someone had done it somewhere and kind of knew it, it would have protections on itself.
Absolutely.
Say, well, I can't answer questions about passwords. Sorry.
Yeah, they might tell you a little
even
bit.
Though they might know it.
Yeah, it will tell you a little bit about what passwords are and good password process, etc. But it's not going to give you, if you start asking it technical questions about how can I do I don't know, some sort of some code injection on this website, it's not going to tell you. But the problem we've got is
there's probably some dark web thing that does do it. Saying they've ripped it off and made it the evil ChatGPT. So
and there's multiple evil AIs out there.
Is it true? So if I was to take a spreadsheet with loads and loads of personal data and put it onto ChatGPT and ask it to do something with it, would it then know it? So that if someone else asked it, could you tell all the personal data that David Bloxham knew? It would say, "Oh, here's all the personal data," because it's kind of in there. Is that an actual thing? Is that just an urban myth?
It's certainly
it knows
not.
everything that's ever been put onto it.
No, it's not an urban myth. Certainly, that information is going to be sitting there somewhere. However, the main providers are taking great steps around securing what sits within those large language models. Very much like GDPR, if we identify personal data, or PCI DSS, if we identify a credit card number, we omit it, we'll hash it, or we'll do something with it that makes it unreadable. The problem is, when we send information into ChatGPT, it could be very difficult for that AI engine, that large language model, to actually identify what is personal identifiable information. So it could well be sitting there. If you say, actually, tell me everything you know about David Bloxham, then it's going to go off, it's going to look at LinkedIn, it's going to look at the websites and find your name. But if all of a sudden it realized there's an article that could look like a standard news article that somebody submitted somewhere, or somebody had written and it was malicious, the information in it is false, it could present that as a true, because it can't tell the difference between
it doesn't know what's and I think that is just so interesting. Is it such a it's such a game changer in terms of business, in terms of leadership, in terms of the networks. And I think because it is a child, right? It's not actually that intelligent yet.
No, it's not.
And obviously there's different worries, there's different problems when it becomes super intelligent. We don't need anyone else. It would just hack you anyway, just for the giggles. And it's great that we've gone all the way from Acorn Electrics all the way through to large language models and Dora and stuff like that. But so when you're giving advice to people, what are you really focusing in on? What is the leadership that people can show? So what, for myself as a CEO, for CEOs listening, for leaders listening, that want people to really, really care about this stuff, what is the best things that we can do?
I without a doubt, and I've said this for so many things that I do, is make it personal. Get all the jargon, because people get lost in all of that. People get scared by AI. Never make it a scary subject. Don't use it as a sort of a stick that you beat people with. It's about making it easy for them to understand and relatable to their business. So the first thing you always need to understand is, what is that business? What are they doing? What risks might they be exposed to? And then coming at a level that sort of says, well, you're a retail agency, you've got shops, you've got your tills, your points of transaction. You've got all these great controls in because you've outsourced this to a provider, and they're looking after, they're making sure you're not being fraudulent activities not occurring. But how are you then getting that information from your computer that tells about stock back to your your head office, because we can see that you're sending it in an unencrypted spreadsheet. So it's about making it relatable, making them understand where the risks are that they have within their business that they may not be aware of, because we've all heard you can't see it because it's too close to you. So taking
Yeah.
that step back, making people understand, if you take a step back, look at the broader picture, look at all those things that are going on in your business, talk to the people in your business, because you have to understand how you're operating to find the best way then of securing and working with that team, but make it so that it's personal to the organization, because generic information, it goes in one ear out the other, it's boring. It's about making it relatable, and as soon as you do that, it makes implementing cybersecurity within a business a much easier and a much more important part of the agenda for the leaders.
People tend to care more when it's more personal, and yeah, you would care more about your own security at home, like you said, with kind of doorbells, etc., like alarms, on your car, etc. You've got to think about it personally, like with your car, and obviously for us, obviously we've invested a lot in as a business in cyber, and we see it as a really important, exciting area for us, big growth area for us. How do you see the business landscape changing? I was interested. I wanted to ask you a little bit about the CrowdStrike thing, which is obviously not an actual cyber attack. But I know from everything you've spoken about, with you as a professional, you're like that God.
Yeah.
I did. Is that kind of like oh my God, how could someone do that type of thing for yourself?
You just summed it up there.
Yeah.
It's a palm face moment.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's human error at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But I always say CrowdStrike, without any sort of preference to any of the organizations, vendors out there at the moment, CrowdStrike have been doing a very, very good job for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
There's a reason they're as big as they are. There's a reason why Microsoft are as big as they are, not to differentiate between any of these providers. They made an error. And I think people are focusing on that single error that caused a problem. But how many times have those organizations protected those businesses and
Yeah,
prevented
totally.
bigger
Yeah. And you
problems?
don't know about that, right? You've never
Exactly.
even heard of CrowdStrike. The average man in the street, a woman in the street would not have heard of CrowdStrike, but now everybody knows about CrowdStrike. So
Exactly. But it
yeah.
goes back to that very fundamental thing of making sure you're doing the basics
Yeah.
brilliantly. Making sure you are checking your code, running it in a test environment before you put it into live, making sure you're documenting your changes. And if there are changes, like in this particular case, I think it was a length of commands, putting very simply, that exceeded the space for it to go into, then make sure the people in that organization are very aware that changes like that have happened. And
Yeah.
we talk about good practice, and it's good change management at the end of the day.
Totally. Yeah.
Doing that process well is going to protect your business.
I'd always just like to know who. I mean, you'd never find out, would you? If the CEO's taking the can, as a good leader should, down with your ship
Yes.
and all that. But
Yeah.
there's someone somewhere that knows they did it. I'd love to be that person. That's a great story to tell. Like I crashed the internet. I did
Strike.
it. It
Yeah.
was me. You
It's
know.
unbelievable, but that exactly it. And I think and the CEO, I think, has done phenomenally well. The business has done very well about communicating, letting
Yeah.
people know what's going on, being very open. I've seen some great letters as well that have been published from CrowdStrike around what happened, what they're doing, and the openness of that. And I think that's really important for any business. If you have a breach, if you have a problem, is don't try and hide it. Talk about it, be honest, and let people know what you're doing to resolve that problem. And then once the dust is settled and you've done something to ensure that it's not going to happen again, make sure people are aware of that, because no one is 100% secure. And being
Yeah.
able to make sure, when the worst happens, that you are prepared, that you have got the right things in place to talk to the right people, to report the breach, to get the right people in to help you through that incident, and keep communicating with your customers, with your employees, and reassuring them that you're doing everything you can to get things back where they need to be. And then those additional measures are put in afterwards to protect the business even more. It's absolutely key, because if you hide it away, it's going to cause you more problems than it's worth. And I think we've seen that with some very, very major names in the past, where they've not told people about the breaches and the extent of those breaches.
So what I can see, therefore, and you talked before about DORA and businesses doing business and their own regulations and that sort of stuff. So I can see, and we talk about the cybersecurity business environment itself, you can see there being regulations now, like people thinking we should regulate and these guys could conform to certain standards because if they get it wrong,
Yep,
this is what happens, right? You know, obviously they're trying to protect us, but the protections could actually hurt us as well, right? So do you think
absolutely.
that's something that could kind of come along? I don't know, I'm sure there are kind of, you know, internal codes, but you don't hear a lot about the companies themselves being because they hold a lot of power, right?
Absolutely. And I think we've we've heard about things that have been sort of talking about in the back
Mm.
room. You know, I've been privileged to work with some people that have been on some advisory boards around what regulation should be put in place. But you know, you're absolutely right. SolarWinds is a case in point in that particular example, where their breach led to that sort of using the SolarWinds platform to then go off and access all those other customers. And
Yeah,
MSPs, MSSPs, you know, you could say they are holding the keys to the kingdoms with these
yeah,
organizations, because if they're breached, they've got that direct access in so many cases
yeah.
into their
They've got all the
servers.
access, haven't they? You know?
Exactly, they've got the, you know,
Yeah,
and I think how we connect into those organizations, and you know, using things like just-in-time access rather than sort of always having accounts that
yeah,
are available, that absolutely should be mandatory for businesses that are providing services into other organizations. So I think certainly I would advise anybody that is looking at bringing managed services or outsourcing any
mm,
element of their cybersecurity in particular to another organization, is they make sure that that organization has those strict controls in place, that they haven't got direct access to systems. If they do need it, it's on a request basis. It has to be approved,
yeah,
because you know, the last thing you want is one of those big MSPs being targeted and it leading to the breach of all of their customers.
yeah. And that's very much trust, right? The whole of this whole thing and what you've spoken about throughout this podcast is communication, making it personal, but and that all links into trust. You
Yes,
know, that security, as far as I can see, it, same as going back to end user security, all that sort of stuff. It's about trust. I trust you to log into my system and not mess it up. You
yeah,
know, and that goes from your receptionist all the way through to your MSP, right? Or the CEO. You know, just
absolutely.
don't do anything stupid. You know, there's a lot of value I'm letting you have, you know.
And that's why we put so much focus as well on making sure that we look at our supply chain. We
Yeah,
make sure they're meeting standards. You know, you have to earn trust, and that's
yeah,
the key thing. And proving that you have the right controls, the right security in place, that you're doing the right things, and that all of their, you know, that third parties users are equally getting that cybersecurity training and awareness that they need, and then and only then you give them that element of trust. But we're moving further and further towards, I'm not going to use the term zero trust, not one I like, but
yeah,
certainly assessed trust, and
yeah,
only when needed. And if you start looking at these sort of these new approaches, PIM, PAM, you know, privileged access management, privileged identity management, being able to request that just-in-time access, you know, going through a change request, ensuring that when you request it, it goes through, it gets approved, and you get that access for a certain amount of time only, and then your
yeah.
access is reduced as much as possible. And equally, managing your own access controls within a business, making sure they're up to date, making sure you haven't got legacy things that are still open, people accessing things they shouldn't. It allows you to really start bringing that down, and then the trust is absolutely there because you're getting that trust level absolutely right.
Totally. And I think that's what it's all about. So for yourself, Roberts, what's exciting for you for your business in the next 18 months as you're progressing more into a more consultancy type role?
So yeah, I think my sort of big focus now is around data security.
Okay.
As I said earlier, data is absolutely king. That's how people are making their money, holding people to ransom. Um, you know, I'm seeing phishing, although it's still very prominent in the market. I'm seeing that beginning to slow down because of the technologies that we have that are able to detect phishing. I mean, the
Yeah.
phishing emails that I'm seeing are phenomenal. They are so good these days. Some of them are very difficult to tell apart from the real thing. But of course, the technology we have that can capture those various differences, where it's come from, how it's presented, where it's taking you to, and stopping you accessing that malicious website that might harvest your details, try and get you
Mm.
username, passwords, etc., is becoming really strong now. We're not hearing about that type of thing happening as much, but there's still a lot of organizations that haven't got those controls in place. So making sure that people understand, protect your data by using those. And for
Mm.
those that have, what is going to be that next thing? Because the attackers are going to still be looking at how they get hold of that data. How they get it, I'm not going to be sure about. But if we can protect our data to make it unusable if it leaves our environments, we're a step ahead.
Yeah,
So
it's like those
that's really
watermarks and whatever, and the items that they kind of blow up
data
in
leak
really
leak
plain. So
prevention,
yeah,
all of that good stuff. We're keeping an
yeah,
eye on our data, making sure you have to be authorized on a system to be able to access and use that data, good encryption, and then all of a sudden, even if there's another way in to get to that data, it's not going to be worth having, because as soon as it's taken out of that environment, it can't be used. So it's how we get to
yeah,
that point now, I think, is the critical thing over the next 18 months, as we see some of the what we call traditional attacks these days sort of slowly diminishing as the technology and the approach that we've taken to prevent them really comes to fruition. And I always compare this back to sort of the firewall technology we spoke about earlier. People don't go through the front doors anymore. So what
no,
we've done, that's all great, very secure. The endpoint was the next target. We've made it very secure. And we've also made all of those interactions that our users have with email, with internet,
yeah,
etc., very secure. So what is it next? And that's
yeah,
the
what's
thing.
coming?
How do
Yeah,
we
yeah,
get ahead of that?
yeah. Well, it's been a fascinating conversation, and I feel proud that I feel like we've gone through the whole history of network security up from the start to the present day, if you know what I mean. And as men of certain ages, Robert, we can do that because we've seen it all.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's
Absolutely.
been very good. You know, hope you have a fantastic, next few weeks and in the rest of the year. It's been really, really good to speak to you, and I'm sure we'll be speaking again soon. But thanks very much, Robert. Cheers.
Likewise, David. Thank you very much.